He's the most talented quarterback in our league. A lot of discussion about Carson Beck heading into the season. This time, an insider report from Adam Rittenberg at ESPN where he's gone through and asked about 25 or 30 quarterbacks. Here's what one SEC coach said about Carson Beck. He said he's the most talented quarterback in our league. An SEC coach said, I'm going to try to put it on the screen here. He's a little bit skinny, but he's got height. He's got a great arm, great action, great velocity. He sees the field really well, and you could just tell in the second half of the season, his confidence really grew being their quarterback, and they put the game in his hand. Prior to the Auburn game, they really didn't trust him. And here's what a defensive coordinator had to say to ESPN about Carson. He said, real arm talent, touch, velocity, all that, and he's big. You don't realize how big that kid is until you get up on him. As a person who visits with Carson before or after games and so forth, he's about my height. I'm about 6'4". He might be a little taller than me. I'm not sure. He's certainly not as large as I am as a person. So he's not 230 plus, but he's probably 220. He's a big person for sure. Long, lanky is probably the best way to describe him. I want to go back to a conversation I had with a current Georgia coach, and this was actually in the fall of 2020. And at the time, and I've written about this, at the time, there was not a lot of, we didn't know who was going to start at quarterback for Georgia. So it was coming down to an injured JT Daniels who had not been cleared, Dwan Mathis, and Stetson Bennett, and Carson Beck. Those were the four guys because Jamie Newman had checked out, of course. And at the time, that assistant at Georgia said, I don't know, but Carson Beck's our best thrower. That keeps coming up now. We're 4 years after that, or whatever the math is on that. And, there's always been a lot of positivity about Carson Beck. And it's not surprising that here we are in year 5 of this thing for him, season 5. And, Carson's getting a lot of attention from coaches around the league. I read the bulk of those. Jalen Milroe, the Clemson quarterback, Jackson Dart, a lot of people around the league, and nationally and so forth. And Beck was one of the few guys that there wasn't some sort of hesitation about from the insiders. When coaches talk off the record, they're completely honest. And so that's the value of those types of articles is people are telling you the truth. If the person, there's no way people would say, my name's, I don't even know, Kalen DeBoer, and this is what I really think. That's not how it works. No one would say that. Even we modulate what we say. So that was something that to me was very curious about, Stetson, not just Stetson, but Carson Beck. I mean, here's a guy who's going to have a lot of pressure on him and had pressure last season. I think one of the quotes that was exactly right was, they didn't really ask Carson to turn it loose until the Auburn game. And they had to have him. Against South Carolina, I think he played pretty well in the second half, actually. But it was the Auburn game where, it was like, hey, look, it's time, man. You got to go. And he did. There's just no doubt about that. Our video today is brought to you by Autograph. I want to make sure y'all are seeing this new app. I've got the Braves up here. And this is a neat app, and here's why I'm showing it to you. It tells you they're playing tonight at 7 o'clock. You're watching this at 7 o'clock. They're playing at 7:08. You can see that in the upper corner. There's a slew of articles. You can listen to podcasts, etc., from the AJC, from all these other folks. I don't know who they are necessarily because I don't live in Braves world. But I wanted to show you, you can read all these articles, a one-stop destination for you to get a slew of different content. Here's the Braves Twitter, and it's going to send you straight to that spot. So check that out. I got a link down below to Autograph. Really neat platform. They've got Georgia, they got the Braves, they got the Falcons, they got everybody that you could possibly need. Download that today. Use the code UGA. Use the code UGA with our friends from Autograph, and I'm sure you'll be glad that you downloaded it. To be honest with you, so we're getting closer and closer to the season here. We're about 8 days away by the time you watch this, and it will come down to, does Carson Beck play the way that people think he can, or or the way he's shown he can? Like whichever you want to put it. I mean, he has been so good at times. I mean, you're talking about a guy who the completion percentage was really sick last year, and can he follow that up this year? Says he sees the field really well, and you could just tell in the second half of the season his confidence really grew being Georgia's quarterback, and they put the game in his hand. Prior to the Auburn game, they really didn't trust him. Real arm talent, touch, velocity, all that, and he's big. You don't realize that until you get up on him. The other thing that I was reading for a lot of other, specifically about Shedeur Sanders, and this is the difference between him and Carson Beck right now, is obviously Sanders just did not get any protection last year. He does check for his protection. Look at that. I've got Carson on the screen. I'm just looking at the weight at 220, which was my guess. Of course, maybe people knew that before I started the video, but I was just kind of guessing. Carson Beck understands completely how to play in the pocket. Like, it doesn't bother him being in there. He is tall, two hands on the ball all the time. And he's just an exceptional quarterback, particularly in the pocket. And when you look at from the Auburn game, I'm not going to talk about touchdowns or anything like that. Auburn, 70%. Kentucky, 80%. 74% against Vanderbilt. He didn't play well in that game. He played okay. The Gators, 68%. 66% worst of the season, I think, until the Tech game for him against Mizzou. Mississippi, 72%. 80% against Tennessee. He was 24 of 30. 3 touchdowns, 298 yards. And then here he is, 65% against Tech, 72% against Alabama. It was 21 of 29. No touchdowns, so that wasn't good enough. And then obviously against Florida State, didn't play very long, 13 of 18 for 72% with 2 touchdowns. This guy could be lethal in 2024. Could be lethal. And as someone who's seen him from junior year of high school on, he had to grow up physically, mentally. And I think that because he's done that, now you're seeing people say what they're saying. And he's had 2 offensive coordinators. That's it. He's not had 3. The beginning of the Kirby, Georgia fiefdom, his kingdom at Georgia, there were a lot of coordinators. I mean, they rolled through some guys until they got to these last 2, and now you've not seen a lot of change. I mean, from 16 to 20, you had 3 different coordinators in 5 seasons. And since that time, we're on season 5. They only had 2, right? So I think because of that and the development at that position, that's been really important to the success of Carson Beck. Mike Bobo's already put one number 1 draft pick in the NFL. There's not a lot of people that put 2. It is possible that he could put 2 there, and with Matthew and Carson, and with Matthew was more raw than Carson was when he got to Georgia. He has higher potential, Matthew, but he was raw. Matthew really wanted to win. He wanted to win quick. He trusted his arm probably more than he should have at times. Matthew needed to play. And coincidentally, when they played Auburn on the road out there in the rain and blew Auburn out, number 5 Auburn, a week after losing to Kentucky, that was the moment where Matthew took off. Like, boom. He was, that conclusion of that 6th season was beat number 5 Auburn, beat ranked Georgia Tech, beat Virginia Tech, ranked Virginia Tech. Boom, boom, boom. They were very good for a while. Matthew did not have the talent around him that Carson Beck does, but he wasn't without talent on that team. No, Sean Marino was pretty good. So these two guys, Matthew is exceptional. He's probably a Hall of Fame quarterback in the NFL. We don't know that about Carson Beck. We don't know if he's going to be a Super Bowl winning quarterback. We don't know if he's going to be a franchise quarterback. It seems pretty clear he's going to be a first-round guy. But when you talk to people, this is not like new about Carson Beck. This is something that for however long that was 2020, that for 5 years now, for 5 seasons, people have been talking about this guy has the best arm talent. Aaron Murray, before he had to take the stuff down on Twitter, that in 20, I think it was in 20, maybe 21, I think it was 20, was talking about how good Carson Beck was. And, if you read what we wrote or what I wrote over the summer about Carson Beck and his journey and all that, it's of course it's been challenging for him. It's always challenging going to college and being the star, being a star and not playing. You don't get that. That was something that Carson talked to me about, in Dallas, was when, it's hard to really, well, I remember very specifically him telling me after Jacksonville, it's hard to really celebrate in Jacksonville. And this is where he was from in 22, 21, when you're not the starting quarterback. Like, when you're a quarterback, it does, it probably didn't sit right for him to jump into the stands. He did it in 24 or 23. My suspicion is he'll do it in 24. But he is an important part of where Georgia's at right now. I mean, one of the things to remember is that, Dylan Raiola would be at Georgia right now if Carson Beck had left. And that, I don't know the full story about that. I mean, in terms of what I don't know the full story yet about that. But there's been plenty of rumor that well before the decision was announced that Beck was going to stay, and Georgia wanted him to stay. But when you go back to back with Monken and then Bobo as your offensive coordinator, both those guys have scored a lot of points, man, in college football, and that's what I'm expecting from Carson and Georgia this season is how many points can you score? Because it should be a lot, and then can you do it in clutch moments? We know they can score a lot of points. We know they can do it in clutch moments. The difference this time will be if you lose the SEC championship game, all that means now is you're not going to get a bye in the college football playoff. That's all that means. That's wrong. That's wrong. But that's all that means. And it doesn't mean you get knocked out. And it shouldn't have been. Georgia, they shouldn't have been knocked out last year. They were, but that was, we were a year too early or a year too late, whatever you want to call it, for Georgia in that position. And, did the 4 best teams play? Florida State would tell you no, but we don't think Florida State's in the top 4 either. So I'm glad we got 12, but it's probably 4 too many if we're being truthful about it. And but more football, the better for some people on the screen. And I love it, but it's not the first time I've heard SEC coaches talk in a very good way about Carson Beck. But he does have issues, for sure. He's got to get better with particular things. His deep ball was not ideal. There were times he made mistakes. I mean, one reason why Georgia had such a struggle with Auburn was some of the errors that Carson made in that game. So, those errors, though, let you see why he's so good. Because there was no freak out. Like, Carson Beck is not freaking out. That's not who he is. That's not his personality or any of that stuff. So, I just want to talk about Carson. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next video.